Today we are commemorating Africa Day and 60 years of the African Union, which was formed in 1963 on May 25, initially as the Organization of African Unity, which later evolved in the African Union. So as I quote the philosopher Rousseau, who says, all men are born free, but everywhere are in chains. I think it goes to the practicality of people not being able to enjoy their rights on the African continent. And today we reflect on the African continent because it is unique in its own way. We have our own struggles, which are different from other continents. And we have all our own experiences, which are different from other human rights defenders from other continents. So there's a famous phrase which says we have people who are born free, but in actual fact, which we are not really born free. And this relates to young people who were born, if you look in Zimbabwe, young people were born after the white minority rule. If we are looking at South Africa, we are looking at people who were born after the apartheid rule. But in actual fact, we are not born free. Why? Because we cannot exercise our political rights freely. We have no right to freely express ourselves. And today we just want to reflect on the experiences of human rights defenders across the continent, as we hear from seasoned human rights defenders that are among us. And I would like to welcome Saling Nube from Women's Coalition of Zimbabwe. And I would like to welcome Dennis Orengo from Kenya. I would like to welcome Pilile Mavuso from Swaziland. And I'm just realizing that some of our panelists have not joined yet, but are coming to join. So now I will leave the floor to Nicole Piri, who is going to facilitate us through our meeting. Thank you. Nicole Piri.
Good evening, everyone. My apologies, I'm having some network challenges here. I would like to call upon Robson Chere. He'll be our first speaker for tonight. Robson, can you kindly share with us your experiences as a human rights defender in Zimbabwe?
I'm not quite sure if we have Robson on the meeting yet. If he is there, I'm not sure which username he's using.
Okay, so I can move on to JD Orengo. JD Orengo, can you share with us your experiences as a young human rights defender?
Thank you, everyone. I've not been able to catch the question. So I can just come up a bit. I was trying to settle in a more silent environment.
Yeah, that's okay. Can you share with us your experience as a human rights, young human rights defender?
Uh, Good evening, comrades and friends and fellow countrymen of Africa. I believe you are all well. My name is JD Orengo. JD means Juma Dennis. And I'm from a human rights defender from Kenya, from an organization called Social Justice Centers Working Group. So straight to the question, my experience as a human rights defender from Kenya is our advocacy has mutated. And if I can give a fast forward, of course, we know Africa was colonized, then we attained our independence in 1963. Then fast forward to 90s, from 1990, Kenya experienced now what we term as a second generation of human rights activism, where in 90s, the country, basically human rights defenders were championing for multi-party democracy to come from a one-party state. And during that period, calling yourself a human rights defender was a very big crime. And it was very rampant to be, and also to be disappeared, and even to be taken to torture chambers. And in 90s, the country lost so many human rights defenders. And even in that period of 1990s to the year 2000, we had a very huge influx of religious leaders who were acting as human rights defenders in Kenya. Unfortunately, most of them were killed, others were disappeared. And then fast forward when we managed to overthrow through elections in 2002, the authoritarian regime of the then government called KANU government. After that, now we never experienced, from 2002, we never experienced so many rampant deaths of human rights defenders. We attained our multi-party democracy. Then now it gave a mutation to what we call the 21st generation rights, whereby now we started advocating for socioeconomic rights, constitutionalism, because we have a very good constitution, but the problem is implementation, digital rights, and then it also came with a lot of advocacy on women's rights and the rights of the minority. So that is where we are currently as a nation. And of course, we've made some milestones which we'll be able to address later. But now our main advocacy, our main area of focus is constitutionalism. We have a proper document, but implementing that document is the problem, because the constitution gives us the right to life, but extrajudicial killings continue to be on the rise. The constitution has given us a freedom of speech, but unfortunately, your freedom is not guaranteed after the speech, you see? So that is where we are as a country. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. So moving on to the next questions. What are the milestones that have been reached in Kenya that proves the significance of human rights work?
Come up again.
What are the milestones that have been reached in your country, in Kenya, that proves the significance of human rights work?
Thank you, comrade. So we've attained several milestones, and sometimes it's good to mention these milestones so that when the going gets tough, it reminds you that there are people who paid the price before you came, and significant progress has been made. It's also prudent to share about the milestones so that when we share our stories from different countries, from from different parts of Africa, we tend to give others who haven't attained our level of, for lack of a better term, our level of success, some hope that there's always light at the end of the tunnel. So the first milestone we've achieved is having a very, very progressive constitution. And why is it a progressive constitution? This constitution is progressive because it gives the local citizen right to public participation. Government cannot just come up with anything without involving the public. Then the constitution has also aligned different independent institutions. Whether they've achieved 100% independence is a discussion we can always have. Then the constitution now outlaws, it has the rights of arrested persons, whereby previously people would be just arrested and you're not given a reason of arrest. You get detained and all that. Another progressive thing we've attained in milestones in terms of human rights work is the right to protest, which is enshrined in the constitution. And protest is the mother of democracy. Without protest, it's very difficult to achieve all these human rights that we are advocating for. So the right to protest is something that we celebrate, and we are really protecting it. Though we have a new government, which is less than a year, and there are some protests which were held a month ago, and the heavy presence of the police really made us to question that does the government really respect human rights? Then another thing I can touch on, apart from the new constitution, right to protest, which was never there before in the previous years, is the freedom of speech, as I highlighted. In Kenya, we never face internet shutdowns. In Kenya, you can actually speak your mind. In Kenya, you can go to court and sanction the government. And we've had several court cases, the biggest one being the presidential elections, which were overturned in 2017. And it was something that set a new precedence in African elections and how courts are run. So those are things that we can really say are milestones. And then previously, like in the last 15 years, registering an NGO or just a human rights CBO, community-based organization, was so difficult. But nowadays, you can actually register all these organizations in Kenya from your phone at the comfort of your house. So I think those are milestones to celebrate, and we should always never forget. We should never forget of these milestones, because if we forget about them, we risk slipping back to where we were before. Thank you so much, comrade.
Thank you so much, Daisy Orengo. I'd like to appreciate the work that you are doing as a young human rights defender. It also motivates us as young generations of human rights defenders. So I would like to acknowledge citizen defenders in the room. I would like to acknowledge Arnold Sunka, who is a ZimRights member and also a former ZimRights chairperson. I would like to thank you for joining us. This is a program that is hosted by ZimRights Youth Zone as a way of building the next generation of human rights defenders. So back to you, JG Orengo. What are some of the challenges that are encountered by human rights defenders in Kenya?
Challenges encountered by young human rights defenders are so rampant and many. One is lack of physical, first, lack of profiling. You know, the moment I call myself a human rights defender, the government profiles me. And this profiling is so rampant that majority of young human rights defenders have gone for exile. they've gone for hiding, because once you profile, then your life becomes at risk, the life of your family members become at risk, and you're not able to conduct your activities in a very organized and sober way. Another thing that young human rights defenders are currently experiencing, and more so women, is online gender-based violence. Because our governments, and this I know is an African issue we can all relate with, our governments are very, very good in propaganda. They are very, very good in propaganda, and some of these politicians own media stations, and they even pay bloggers to drive a certain agenda. So because of this might, young human rights defenders always experience online GBV, and you get smeared, your name gets spoiled, and I know one who is very close to me currently. She's in a safe house because government decided to spread a propaganda on Facebook that she's turning young people to be members of the LGBTQ community. And you know, these minority rights have not been fully embraced in Africa amongst some cultures. So the community members began to turn against this young human rights defender simply because she was advocating for the rights of the LGBTQ community. And another one is, you know, human rights defender, human rights work, I always say it comes with something we call a spirit. It can just spark out. You can see something happening on the streets, then you become a human rights defender from that day actively. Although all of us are human rights defenders in one way or another, but others are active in protecting and defending the rights of others. That's why we call them activists. So you find there's no school to train you to become a good activist or to become a good human rights defender. You learn on the way. And because there is no curriculum or a syllabus or certification, most of young human rights defenders do not have physical and online security techniques and tactics. And this has made us, particularly in Kenya and even in Africa, to lose very young human rights defenders. And we have one of us from my organization who was disappeared the year 2020 when COVID was going on for simply questioning, because our country had misappropriation of COVID funds, COVID grants from the IMF. So when this young guy stood up to question why the government is misappropriating funds and all that, he was disappeared, and we've never heard his whereabouts to date. So physical and online security is so rampant. Online gadgets get hacked, and online GBV, whereby human rights defenders get smeared with propaganda and all that, and even profiling. Like us, we advocate against extrajudicial killings. So government comes with a very strong propaganda that we are defending thieves in the community. And if it finds that you are not active on the ground, the community will actually buy this propaganda. And if the community buys this propaganda that you are attacking thieves, they will turn against you. Thank you, comrade.
Thank you so much, Daisy Orengo, for sharing some of the challenges. I would like to acknowledge the presence of our National Council members, Entrance Takayeza and Ishmael Mukandla. I would like to thank you for joining us. I would like to invite Sally Nwe from WICOS. Good evening, Sally. Hello, Sally. Good evening. Hello, Sally.
Hi, good evening. Sorry, I was just typing in the chat box because it was not enabling me to connect. Hi, everyone, and happy Africa Day to all of us. So for me, my name is Salingube, and I'm serving as National Coordinator for Women's Coalition of Zimbabwe. I've been invited here. I want to celebrate the work of ZimRights Youth Zone, and then acknowledge the policymakers in the room, and the human rights defenders who came before our time, and Habari Dennis, thank you also, and other comrades from the region. So I've been invited to share about my experience as a human rights defender. I would start from a space of, for you to become a human rights defender, it's something that is intentional. It's something that is also personal, because the world I come from is the personal is political. So it's around you bringing your being, your wholeness, your talents, your gifts, your passion, your energies, and just who you are in the space. So it's really also, we are always work in progress as human rights defenders. And it's something that you connect with at whatever level or stage of your life. Some connect through student union, like my journey. I started at high school. And then student union, youth movements, women's movement, feminist movements, civil society spaces. So I would say in my journey, it was something that would come in as professional, where I would offer my technical skills, or it would also be people that I would hang around. And there would also be people who would see me and invoke the activist in me to show up and defend human rights. So some of the work I've done really have been around raising awareness, because I'm taking it as something that we are raising the next generation of human rights defenders. So the starting point is around just knowing the rights. So I've also done some work around raising awareness, just back to basics. What are human rights? How do you ascertain and enjoy them? What does it take? What do you need? How do you take responsibility as a rights holder to enjoy your rights? And how do you enjoy your rights, not at the expense of the rights of others? And then I've trained also quite a number of, so there's also an element around capacity development, mentoring and coaching, volunteering my time, my expertise, my resources, my spaces of influence to carry other generations with me, or to show up in solidarity to other generations of my age and those above my age. I've also done a bit of resource mobilization, because we have to resource the revolution, you know, in terms of time, practical tools of organizing and holding space for each other. There have been also technical support, like I said, depending on what expertise or skills have been in need of different generations and processes. And facilitating linkages, because, you know, we are a resource first as human rights defenders to ourselves. So there have been other areas where people needed linkages, people needed me to facilitate access to platforms, the voice, and all that. I have done that kind of work, and I'm still doing it. And then taking leadership opportunities, because human rights defense work is also placed in institutions, social movements, and platforms or political processes where we need as human rights defenders to show up, take up leadership opportunities, and provide leadership. And then if you would say also, so the experiences are positive and negative. I've grown in my human rights defense, and I'm always evolving. So you as young people or generations that came, it's just for us to learn, acknowledge, and appreciate that we are always work in progress. Unfortunately, the context we have been in, the African context, you know, connecting with today, there are some unresolved issues around the slave trade, around the colonialism, the liberation movements, how we were doing it, the independence pathway in terms of the liberation movements, and then the democracy journey, however any African country have been evolving in its growing democracy. And democracy is always fragile, because sometimes when we shift power, there are always these challenges. And then there are social norms, really, that becomes a challenge. I'll jump quickly to milestones, because I've limited time, I asked earlier, so my apologies, you get part of me and not all of me today, but I'll give my best. So on milestones, I would say there have been legal reforms that have happened, there have been institutional reforms, there have been political reforms, and even in our education curriculum, we are beginning to see nuances, whether it's at college, tertiary, university, the primary level, the secondary level. We are beginning to see some shifts here and there. Yes, there's cherry picking of which rights show up in terms of content in education. There are also now platforms and human rights defenders networks, spaces, support mechanisms that have evolved and continue to grow, but that are now in place as milestones that we need to celebrate today and acknowledge. We also now have the issues around access to information to say, you know, I'm celebrating this platform today to say we can actually be in a Zoom call, talk about human rights defenders. So for me, the evolution or the platforms that online digitalization of spaces to access information have been something that have been progressive, that we celebrate as a milestone, and even political institutions, multi-party democracy platforms. And then the challenges have been really resistance. And then in terms of supporting mechanisms that are there, it's projectizing the support of human rights defenders. Human rights defenders are not projects. People are not projects. We live life. We evolve with each generation. And then generations of human rights defenders have also been set up against each other. So there have been some nuances of ageism where those that came before us and those that come after, we are just set up against each other. And then there have been issues, you know, the ageism has resulted in intergenerational disconnect. That we are not connected and gelling across generations in moving the line and crossing the line to push back, to hold space, and to have a seamless intergenerational flow of us defending the rights. Then the cost of asserting rights. So I would say some of the issues around young people and other vulnerable communities is for you to assert your rights, you have to have an identity document. So if you can't access an identity document, equals to you not asserting or enjoying your other rights. And then we have also been blind to say there's a cost attached to you enjoying your rights. For you to exercise your right to vote, you need to travel. So if you have to cherry pick to say, am I going to have a meal or pay a transport to go and vote? Sometimes our work or how we want to defend rights is eroded by practical livelihoods issues, bread and butter issues. Then the religious extremisms and harmful practices that are cultural, that gag young people, that gag women, that gag different communities and minority ethnic groups to say you cannot be because we don't acknowledge you. Some religious extremism even demonizing rights, you know, and us being in denial of other people who may vary or who may show up and not be like us. And then polarization, disinformation is also something that is taking away from the growth. So the last question that I'm going to share as I end my sharing today is around the risk, to say human rights defenders are always at risk. What are some of the things that we can do to mitigate? I would say this is individual and also collectively. So the issue around building a support system. So for those that are coming on board or those that have been there and those that are transitioning, however you are showing up in this space, you need an individual support system to keep nourishing your fire, to hold space for you when you are in need. And we need to just be mindful to then say, to go to the granular, no matter how small it is, who's going to take care of your children? How are you going to fund your livelihoods? Where are you going to stay? When vulnerability show up, you even testing your own referral pathway, if it is going to work and show up for you when you are in need. The issues of policies, where there are gaps, we need to tighten the policies and state mechanisms for protecting rights, because the state is the primary duty bearer to make sure that we are all protected, because it's not a crime to defend rights. And then safeguarding mechanisms to make sure that they are informed by all our experiences, and us, we are also resourcing and paying attention and sharing our gifts and talents in our homes and all the spaces that we occupy, power and influence, to build that support mechanisms. Where we need to push back on advocacy, we need to continue doing that. Issues around pushing for implementation, accountability, and shifts and continued learning and unlearning journey, so that we hold space together, because there's no winner in a losing team. Our well-being, wellness, and sustainability as human rights defenders is collective. So lastly, I'll just say there's an issue of us being mindful on issues to do with healing. We have been on the front lines all the time. as human rights defenders, if we are not going to be intentional about healing justice, if we are not going to take time to talk about our experiences, hold each other to account, build supporting mechanisms that allow us to grieve, to heal, and gather collective strength and nourish our fire, it will not be sustainable. So thank you. I'm not going to be able to give more of the time. My apologies, but I hope this has been helpful in us beginning to rethink, to shift, and feel the fire in all of us to keep pushing the human rights defenders' work. Thank you, and over.
Thank you so much, Sally, for sharing your experiences. That was an informative and engaging contribution you gave us. I would like to thank you for the impact you are making in young people by mentoring them. We would like to thank you so much for that. I would like to acknowledge Senator Committee for your presence. We thank you so much for taking out your time in your schedule to be with us today. So I would like to invite Pilile from Swaziland. Pilile.
Thank you, comrade, and good afternoon, everyone. I'll start by, okay, my name is Pilile Mavusto. I'm from Swaziland. I've just graduated from student activism. I will start by sharing my experience as a human rights defender. But mostly I'll be sharing on the student perspective because I haven't spent much of my time in the national politics. But I hope by learning and being part of national politics have given me much experience, though my experience is based on student activism. In my experience in human rights defenders in the country, is human rights defenders are unable to fully participate and being able to be active because of the strict restrictions around the country. We have seen a high risk. Usually human rights defenders in the country are always at high risk because the regime itself is all out to silence every voice that is willing to participate in anything that touches base with human rights. And because they are always willing to suppress whatever that is going to rise against whatever the regime that is doing. So we are seeing a lot of human rights defenders being sabotaged, being killed, being assassinated. So most people are engulfed by fear. So human rights defenders are not able to fully participate in all the activities. But what is more important is that in as much as they're trying to silence the voices that are willing to speak, we have seen the youth being fully participating in protecting, in standing up and being active in protecting and being defensive about their human rights. They are now starting to understand what really the regime is trying to do, so that and understand they now fully understand what really human rights are. Because for the longest time in the country, we have not been able to be told or given information that we have rights as human. So now we have seen everyone and the youth being participating and willing to advocate for what is right for them. I will move on to the challenges mostly that are faced by the youth and women as human rights defenders. We have seen many women are not be able to participate because we are raised in a patriarchal society, which doesn't allow women to speak. And having not many women part of being part of participating in most activities in the country because of patriarchy, the women are always left behind. We have seen youth and students being in the forefront, which is giving us hope, and we so much believe that change is going to happen. And in as much as it is always risky to participate, but with what has been done and the advocacy around involving everyone, all hands on the deck, everyone being involved, and understanding that this is not about someone out there, but it's about everyone who has a right, because everyone needs to first understand that we as human, we have rights. But moving on to challenges and obstacles that we all face, especially as the youth, we face challenges of age requirements, mostly in the organization that's participate, are pro-democracy, or are willing to see change and being part of human rights defenders. We see obstacles of individual level, where people lack trust of the political institutions that are being built, because the regime has intensified and working closely with some of these institutions to sabotage or to ruin futuristic leaders, so that no one can be able to understand what is happening. These people doesn't want to see the youth growing. These people doesn't want to see the youth participating in anything that touches with human rights defenders, because they are here to kill and or to destroy our future as Africans, or as Swazis in particular. We have seen they have been implementing legislations that are instilling fear, especially to youth and women, because they don't want women and youth to participate, because they have seen that they are always in the forefront and willing to participate. Also, there is high increase in wrong information. Maybe I will say there is high propaganda machinery within the regime itself that is there to destroy and sabotage the work that is being done by human rights defenders. Moving on to maybe moving on to human rights defenders, what risk human rights defenders are really exposed to. Yeah, we have seen a lot of human rights defenders being tortured, assassinated, some of them being arrested unlawfully, some are out on bail, some of them can't even access to government services, some of them are murdered. Just recently, we have just experienced our prominent human rights lawyer has been assassinated, and no one is taking care of that. The government doesn't even care what really is happening. So maybe for us as human rights defenders, we need to ensure or to put systems in place so that we can be able to protect and work against having these problems being this most of the things happening towards us, because we are not maybe we are not working together towards mitigating the risk. But most importantly, we need to work hand in hand and understand what the regime is trying to do, so that we can be able to facilitate and understand what really are we doing. Not having so many women leaders in the table bring much bigger challenges to human rights defenders, especially women, because the society is fostering the perception that a woman is less competent than a man, so that they cannot participate. And we have these cultural norms that the regime, or Africa-wise, that we are facing, that women should not participate in most of or in human rights, because their rights are not fully
I think we have lost Pilile. It's probably her network. But then I would want us to just reflect on what has been discussed so far, is we are nearing the end of our discussion. I just want to pose a question to you, Denise Orengo. It has been mentioned quite often that human rights work is a high-risk work. And you've mentioned about the extrajudicial killings, you've mentioned about disappearances. I just want to know, what makes you motivated in the midst of all those challenges? What makes you motivated to continue to fight for the freedom of human rights?
Thank you, comrade. First, whether we become human rights defenders or not, we'll still die. So in the course of our work, yes, we take measures to be safe, but we don't think so much of experiencing harm or the most fatal eventuality, which is death. Death is part of life, and today so many people died all over the world. As the human rights defenders know, and most probably there is no human rights defender who has died today out of 6 billion people in the whole world. And if there is, maybe out of sickness. But as we all say, that cowards die so many times actually before their real death. So what keeps us motivated? What keeps us motivated, or what keeps me motivated as a human rights defender, is when I just impact the life of one person. I remember sometimes back, not so long ago, a woman came to say thank you, and she came to where I used to live, and she found one of my relatives, and she gave her a chicken. And you know, Africa, when someone gives you a chicken, local breed, not these GMO ones, what it really means. So this lady, her son was arbitrarily arrested and taken to the courts, and the son couldn't afford to pay bail and all that and bond. And the son was rotting in jail. And if you see reason of arrest, it's very ambiguous, nothing like that. The police just arrested him and they wanted something like $100 so that they can release him. And he didn't have, so they decided to write for him some very dubious reason of arrest. So this son was really rotting in prison and suffering. So when I met this lady, I told her, this is something simple we can do. On the next court date, just let us know, we'll come, we'll understand the technicalities of the case and all that. And to cut the long story short, eventually we managed to release the boy. We went to the prison, offered legal aid to him and the other colleagues who were there, and eventually was released after being in jail for almost 1 year and 3 months. You see? So when we just impact the life of one person, that keeps us going, because we know we are not doing this in vain. And this year, in April, I managed to present a memoranda on disability bill. We are currently working as a country on disability bill 2013. So I presented 4 points on that memoranda, and all the 7 points were accepted and adopted by Parliament. You see, so when such kind of things are done, it gives us joy that you don't have to have you don't have to be wealthy, you don't have to be powerful in politically or what, because now these amendments, they are really going to impact lives of millions and millions of others. And we keep on borrowing law from left, right, center. So maybe some countries will one day come and borrow this disability bill and go and adapt it in relation to their own ways and cultures, you see, and it will continue impacting people. So that is my biggest motivation, seeing that someone smiles after coming to our center to seek for justice, and they go out fulfilled, and they go out feeling indeed justice has been served. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I've also touched on positive experiences that you've encountered as a human rights defender. I think I can also reflect on the presentation that has been made by Sally, that she also mentioned some of the positive experiences that she has had as a human rights defender. And I think that's what keeps us going, also motivates us, because you know that if you can do something to make someone smile or to make someone's life better, then you can do for many other people. I'm just saying that Ikena has just joined us, and we were about to close, but I think you can give us a quick reflection on your work as a human rights defender, and we can move on to wrapping up. Hi, Ikena.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, my sincere apologies. I struggled with the network, struggled hearing you, and I struggled with the time difference as well. So good evening. My sincere apologies for being here late. Okay, so I'm going to confirm if you can hear me and what the instruction is. So I take along quickly.
While we wait for Ikena, I think we have people who want to make their contributions from the audience. You are free to make your contributions. I would like to acknowledge the presence of Ms. Entrance Eza, our vice chairperson from Masingo region. And if there is anyone who is free to make their contributions to the discussions, the floor is now open. You can show by raise of hands, or you can comment in the chat box. Yes, Honorable, you can go ahead.
Thank you so much. I would like to greet all the panelists that are on that platform from various countries. Thank you so much for the great job that you are doing all over Africa. I would like to comment on a broader aspect of our challenge as an African continent. I do agree with the statement which says we are from a liberation struggle for African independence. And that is Africa, we are still living in abject poverty. And we seem not to have a solution. As a result of abject poverty, in an attempt to change things, we are found to be victims, mainly the human rights defenders. It's a pattern all over Africa, and it's taking place in almost every country. And those ones that are in power, they feel threatened by the human rights defenders. So it is true. But what I want to probably suggest and share with you, and we need to debate this and try to look into whether it's really true or not. Africa is not really independent, per se. Yes, of course, we fought for the liberation. But if you know very well, one of the reasons why we were fighting for our liberation in Africa was to completely destroy the imperialist systems that were used by whites to oppress us. Unfortunately, most of our countries did not do anything to dismantle the Western systems that were designed to oppress the African person. If we go down to the case of Zimbabwe, we fought for almost 16 years in the bush. But remember, when we then went for the Longest House Agreement, our African president, Colonel Robert Mugabe, simply came and presided over a system that was used to oppress us. In case of Zimbabwe, up now, the system is still there. The system was designed to cater for the white minority. It was very exclusive of the black majority. So we are trying to free ourselves or to have our rights against a system that was designed, which is very exclusive of the majority. As the majority try then to enter into this system, they are found, they are victimized, because the system is not inclusive. It's not it would not destroy the system that we're fighting for. We inherited. Entire Africa is enslaved by the system that we inherited, yet we fought to change the systems. So Africa is challenged right now to look into those aspects. Is Africa unable to come out with Afrocentric system, a system that are identified with our culture, our identity, and our originality? Are we unable to do that? The answer is no. Africa has got professors, social scientists, many educated people across Africa. But we've been lazy enough to look into ourselves. We've been lazy enough to really think outside the box. We've been lazy enough to challenge the status quo. We just inherited a system that we're not familiar with, a system that we don't know how it is used. Have you ever seen what we do after every election? Every election in Zimbabwe, in Kenya, they are ever disputed. Why do we follow a system that is like that? So I challenge you young people today to go back to your roots and find out best ways that Africans can develop, can use systems that are more inclusive in nature. Our systems that we abandoned before colonialism, they need to be really looked into. How our people are living? Can we look at those systems and modernize them to the current technologies? Can we do something that is for Africa? It is my view that Africa should develop its own systems, especially the governance system. The governance system is the foundation of all our socioeconomic challenges. It is the system that has enslaved us. It is the system that has put us under such punishment and torture. So Africans need to sit down and develop an Afrocentric governance system that has got nothing to do with the Western world, nothing to do with the Eastern world. An Afrocentric system of governance that must be studied in our colleges and schools and universities. The way we study the Western democracy, the way we study the Eastern democracy. Why don't we come to a point where as Africans, we develop our own books, our own models, which will be studied as well by the Eastern Bloc, that will be studied as well by the Oxford University and Harvard University as an Afrocentric governance system. I do believe that sets the foundation of African freedom. the foundation of true leadership, the foundation of independent presidents. At the moment, you can't deny it. African presidents are not totally independent. They are remote controlled. They cannot make independent decisions because they need to get a go-ahead from outside influence. As long as Africans are not fully in charge of their destination and their natural resources, how can Africa develop? Due to poverty, we fight among ourselves. Due to poverty, we got human rights defenders. Due to poverty, we are victimized. Due to poverty, our leaders become so dictatorial in nature. Due to poverty, our leaders do not open up. Even if we have the constitution right now, most of the constitutions what we have in Africa are not fully independent. The independent commissions, the independent judiciary, the independent whatever, are not necessarily independent. One or the other, they are captured, manipulated, and they're just independent on paper. So this is one of the debates that I would want to share with you guys. I could be wrong, but this is what I think, that if we really go to original, think outside the box, and we can do something better for Africa. We can make Africa great. Africa is endowed with natural resources. Africa should be an equal partner on the socio-political sphere. We cannot play a second fiddle to either East or West, because we are Africans and we must stand as Africans. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think that is a lot to digest, and it's a challenge to us young human rights defenders. And when you were mentioning about the Afrocentric system, I started to reflect on the concept of Ubuntu and how it is centered on human dignity and human living, that we are because of others in our society as Africans. And just because of that, we encourage human living. It means we cannot harm the person who's next to us. So maybe we really need to go back and reflect on the Afrocentric system, as you're saying. And it requires a lot, but I'm sure that young human rights defenders who are listening are taking note of that. Anyone who has another point to make? Raising my hand and comment in the chat box.
Thank you, everyone. And as I give my parting shot, I want to appreciate the organizers and everyone. This is the way to go. And I'm glad that you thought about making it a Pan-African discussion. So I say viva, and I say congratulations. So thank you also, Honorable Senator Kumichi, who are the last speaker. And I agree that Africa socialism is the answer. Capitalism will never work in Africa. And this is why I appreciate this discussion, that it's only through having these discussions time and again and organizing on the ground that we shall be able to emancipate ourselves from the mental slavery. Remember, even our education system was not designed by Africans. It was designed by colonialists, and it was designed to make us learn how to calculate arithmetic, how to speak foreign languages, but not how to think and be creative and solve problems. Our education system was designed to make us to be employees. That is why you will find a graduate who has even a master's degree is jobless and they can't solve any problem. So as young people, let us stand up, let us continue to speak out, and let us take action. When someone tells you that you can't, that means you must. And Africa has a Vision 2063. Vision 2063, it's you and I to make it come to fruition, to make it come to a reality. Let us learn from the Chinese. The Chinese always have a 1,000-year plan, and they strictly stick to their plan. Let us go and find out Vision 2063, get to know about it, and see where we can contribute in bringing Africa Vision 2063 to reality. And there are some neo-colonial stuff that I can't fail to mention. We have the IMF loans, the Bretton Woods loans, the Chinese loans. These are the neo-colonialism ways of colonizing Africa. Africa is a very fertile land, and we have to produce more food, trade amongst us, champion for borderless Africa. You don't need to have a visa while visiting Kenya. I don't have to get a visa while visiting Nigeria. Africa should be borderless so that it increases trade within Africans. This will make us to operate without loans. This will make the African wealth to revolve within Africa, and we will be able to deal with this issue of perennial poverty. Again, we have to be very vigilant. I know Zim is going for elections in August. We pray young people come out, register as voters, and vote. This is the first duty that the Constitution gives us, that we are sovereign citizens of a nation. Let us register, let us come out to vote. And let us be vigilant. Let us ensure that Pan-Africanism, the AU, ensures that our elections becomes free and fair. And lastly, I would like to say that nothing comes easy. And for all these things to be easy, we must collaborate. Because until all are free, no one is free. If human rights defenders have been killed, like Tulani, the advocate who was killed in Eswatini, we don't need to keep quiet. Because if you are quiet, your government will also do the same thing in your country. So injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Let us collaborate. Let us always know that until all are free, no one is free. And lastly, let us always begin with the why. With the why. Why are we doing this? If we always ask ourselves that what is our why? Why did we start? Why did we choose this path? Then when the going gets tough, we won't give up, we won't lose hope, but we will continue pursuing the course. And one day we will achieve what we want. The most important thing is we don't leave the struggle where we found it, but we just push it, even if it is for 1%, 2%, but we make sure that we are always sharpening contradictions that pushes our countries forward. Thank you, and viva everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dennis. I think we can now move on. We are now out of time and we are about to wrap up. But before I move on to Jenna, I just want to call Sunka to give us a few words in a few minutes.
So can you hear me?
Confirm they can hear me, please.
That's the way to go.
Thank you. Sorry, you've taken me by surprise. I was not expecting to speak, but I must say that it has been a phenomenal conversation. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yes. So no, it has been a phenomenal conversation. I really want to thank ZimRights as the organizers, and very refreshing to see the youth within the organization taking leadership in looking at Africa, and very, very impressed by the entire conversations of all the panelists from the different countries, Kenya, Eswatini. I couldn't quite figure out where Ike was coming from, but otherwise, yeah, the question of assessment of progress that Africa has made especially from Dennis when he was referring to Kenya and the progress that we made in terms of the fight to liberate Africa from the yoke of racial domination, from colonialism, and the fact that the independence dividend has not been realized yet because we didn't focus enough as Africa on a governance system that would allow for accountable governance and a proper opportunity for our people in Africa to meaningfully engage, across all the spectrum of socioeconomic and political life. And the fact that we continued with the struggle for realization of human rights, which has now culminated in the development of progressive constitutions in the different jurisdictions in Africa, and that those are progressive constitutions, because they don't self-execute, therefore there's been a mismatch between good constitutions and constitutional practices on the ground, and that maybe that is the next phase of the struggle for a better continent. If we begin to harmonize the constitutional tenets in the documents with the practices of government to ensure that we can move from good constitutions to constitutionalism. And then I was also quite happy to realize, the fact that we have the normative framework from a governance perspective, where the African Union as a body collective has a reasonably good standards on governance and on human rights and the rule of law. The African Charter on Human and People's Rights, the ACDEG in particular on African Charter on Democracy, Election and Governance. So I think the statement of intent is there, but the poor leadership is preventing us from being able to compete as a continent. So I think ultimately it's going to be yourselves, the youth. As Joshua Nkomo once said that the country is going to be liberated by the young ones. So I think Africa is also going to be liberated by the young ones. If you look at the Africa we want, which is the Agenda 2063, I think the aspirations of Africa are quite good. How to internalize those in our organizations, in our individual way of life, that's also going to be important. And then finally on Swaziland, yes, I'm very sad that the case of our brother Thulani Maseko has not received the attention it requires in terms of an independent and impartial investigation in order to bring the perpetrators to justice. I think it is wrong for the king, which is the last absolute monarch in the world, to use Thulani's phrase that he treats the people of Swaziland as subjects and not as citizens. I think the graduation of Swazi people from being subjects of the king into citizens of a country who have an equal voice to be involved in the welfare of their own country, I think is now overdue. So there's a failure on the part of SADC and the SADC heads of states to then see the killing of Thulani as a symptom of a very bad governance in that country that requires urgent attention. So otherwise, all in all, I really want to thank you, colleagues at ZimRights, as well as to thank all the panelists. Sally, you were brilliant in terms of giving a very motivational speech, which addressed the question of the intergenerational exchange of ideas, and to deal with ages where sometimes old people find the young as problems, or the young people find the old as the problem. So in the process, the ability of African countries to pass a vision and mission of Africa from one generation to another, so that there can be intergenerational coexistence and the mutual building of our societies to be resilient societies. I think Sally addressed that very well. So I think without trying to convert myself into a panelist, let me say thank you very much, and wish you all the best. Over.
Thank you very much, Arnold, and thank you for the encouragement. It's true, young people are going to save the continent, and like you said, there needs to be a mutual building between the elder human rights defenders and the younger human rights defenders. So I now pass over to Ikena so that you give us your reflections as we close the meeting. Over to you, Ikena.
Yeah, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, can you quickly give us your reflections in a few minutes so that we can...
Yes, I know that we're out of time, so I'll just do this in a few minutes. I'd like to say thank you to the ZimRights for the wonderful work that you do, and not to go on a long route, so I'll just, take it up from where my colleague Dennis, Dennis it was so good to hear your voice though, where my colleague Dennis took it up from. And, something striking that he said that I really want to emphasize and move is that he talked about, China's 1,000-year development plan, right? And so I'll also say that to say that young people in Africa, more so that we are used to agonizing much more than organizing, right? There's a lot of issues, human rights issues prevalent, right? And what we do more is that we do more of, agonizing, talk about the problems, talk about the challenges that we have, talk about how we are not given expression, right? But we seldom, even when we talk about solutions, we seldom act on those solutions that we talk about. So my take home, and my words for this is that, is around how can we become more of an organizing entity than people who always talk about these issues and not act on it, right? What will be the take home for this webinar right now? And after this, robust conversation, what are the actionable points? What are we supposed to do going forward? How can we play a role? How can a listener, someone who did not even, who doesn't even know what to do, how can he do something, And so that's, so, and for me, that's really my conversation. I was listening to a webinar as well sometime 2 months ago, and someone asked that we, in Africa comes from the international organization. The same people who we want to stop, their modern colonization are the people who also give us money to work, right? And so how can we become independent in the sense of it, right? And my question becomes that most of the funding that comes into Nigeria are donor funding and, funding from individual organizations that have built transnational businesses. Let me use the Ford Foundation, and, all the foundations, that funds Africa, that fund Nigeria, that funds Zimbabwe, right? So the question becomes, what about the indigenous companies in Nigeria? How can we start talking about CSR projects, corporate social responsibilities? How can we talk about how can we run our system, without depending wholly, on what these donor people do? So we run to them all the time, and we also want to succeed from their influence and from their power. So these are the conversations that we should start having, going forward. He also talked about borderless Africa. It's surprising that I applied for a visa to come to South Africa in December. I wanted to take a vacation in South Africa, and guess what? It took over 60 days, and they even denied me visa, right? When I had all the qualification and all, and I was like, how? How is that? I'm also supposed to come to Kenya, and I'm not hearing that I need to apply for a visa to come to Kenya, right? So how can we foster a borderless Africa that we had conversation around the Africa free, the continental free trade area zone, and so how can we show that these things are beyond the policies, beyond the peoples? How can we start implementing these recommendations, right, to grow the Africa that we want to see, the Africa that we envisage, the Africa that can be independent? So these funders that we go to, like for example in the US right now, the question is who funds them? Who funds NGOs there? These NGOs are funded by individual donations, right? How can we even foster individual donations in Nigeria? Because you see that the funding that comes from these international organizations come to Africa, right? They come to international communities, but they don't really come to their own people there. Who funds Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation beyond the funding that comes from Microsoft or from his proceeds? He has Warren Buffett and all these philanthropists in the country who funds them. So what does our indigenous billionaires, our indigenous investors, how do they ensure that the Africa that we want to see, that we can also drive it, right? So this conversation for me, I can exhaust it, but, because of time, I didn't want to delve into the things I prepared to say, but I'm just taking a cue from what my friend Dennis opined, and I close by saying that we need to think about organizing much more than organizing. We need to infiltrate the systems, right? And I'll close with this. We did the NSAS movement, NSAS protest in Nigeria, and, it's garnered, attention beyond Africa, even globally, right? On how young Nigerians are saying, oh, no to NSAS, enough of the police brutality, enough of the extrajudicial killings, right? We pushed all we could, and guess what? The government listened, and these things, started changing. But the thing is that even yesterday, we kept hearing news of police brutality and all that. The question is, how many young people are willing to get into the police force? So beyond complaining to the government to sanitize the police, and are we willing to get into the police to sanitize the police ourselves? Are we willing to get into the military? Are we willing to get into the health sector, right? How do we, taking a cue from the 1,000-year plan Dennis talked about, how can we have a plan, even though right now we are agonizing? How can we systematically organize to ensure that in the next 50, 100 years, that these things that we're talking about now will no longer be a case study, right? How can we ensure that we get into the education system to strengthen our education system so that this japa or this, our broad mentality will not be there? A young man from Nigeria is trending because he said that Nigerians are going to UK not because they want to study, but because they want to leave the shores of their country. And he's trending all around Nigeria right now. So the question is that so? Is that true? So and this has been, we've said that then our education system was built to make us employees and not employers or something like that, So how are we changing it? This conversation that we have right now, we can still have it in the next 10 years and nothing will change. So how are we ensuring that we are training the next generation of leaders that will go into this system and change narrative and change, the status quo? So these are the conversations that I'd like us to keep having, going further. And like I said, I wouldn't like to take all our time. I'd like to thank ZimRights again for this opportunity to share, and well done to all the speakers, facilitators. Thank you for the great work they're doing. And, I know that, with our work in the next shortest possible time, God willing, we'll see a better Africa. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ikenna. I think you have said a lot, and the phrase that I've captured is young people like to agonize and not organize. So it's time to organize and not to agonize. And you have said a lot in your presentation, and I think these are conversations that need to be conducted further. And Dennis also mentioned about collaborations as one of the things that really need to be actioned in Africa, address the challenges of human rights defenders, to address all human rights issues. So I think that's one of the actionable things that can be done as we also discuss further. So I'd like to thank every one of you who has participated and we have taken their time from their busy schedules to be with us. And I hope you will have the remaining day, you enjoy it. And thank you once again. We have come to the end of our webinar. And thank you for the motivation. I'm sure that young people, young human rights defenders who are in this call are geared, are motivated to keep doing the work. And we live and fight to see the day when the phrase born free will live up to its meaning. So thank you very much.